All right, what's going on, everybody? Today's class is probably the most important class because not only are you going to have to submit a journal assignment after this, you will also be required to do an actual counseling, 4856. This counts for your final grade, so it's 11 or 10 points, which is 10% of your grade. So um, I want to make sure I get this one knocked out first, so that way if you guys have any questions, and my office hours, we could talk about it, or we could post in the discussion board. All right, so counseling and coaching methods. This is kind of a little bit of a difference. Counseling is kind of more of a one-on-one, while coaching involves the leader getting involved in making it more of a conversation base. So my personal experience, I mean, I've done it all as far as been a part of bad counselings and also been a part of a lot of very successful ones. So, I mean, if you haven't done this, it's going to take a little bit of practice, but hopefully by the end of this class it makes sense and you guys can kind of understand what I'm talking about. All right, so today's learning objectives, we're going to talk about applying counseling and coaching methods and review the 4-stage counseling process. All right, so like I said, counseling versus coaching. So they both want to improve the quality of whatever it is that individuals being counseled on with a goal in the end. All right, so like I said, the difference is counseling is kind of like written down. I mean, you could also coach people. It could also be verbal, right? But like I said, I'm just giving out all the information right here, and like I said, it says it could be slow and painful, but that's why you want to tailor it and make it more of a coaching session, because you don't want it to be painful. You want it to be a conversation base, and to where when the person gets there, when you guys leave, it's kind of like a mutual agreement. It's like a contract you guys are signing almost. All right. All right, so I want to put this up here. It's my baseball card. Typically, when you first show up to a unit, they want to see your baseball card. I've had, I don't know, 5 or 6 different versions of these. I just updated this probably a couple months ago with the new boss. Colonel Welch is leaving, so the brigade commander sent out a template, said, hey, everybody send me your baseball card. So I think it's kind of wise if you guys it's more so like a 5-year plan, but they can go as far out as, I don't know, 10, even 20-year models for people that are career-based. So typically you just want to put on here your personal and your professional timeline. So kind of like, what do you have going on in your life, whether you're getting married, having kids, buying a house, moving, PCSing, and the professional could be as far as what your specific jobs are, future KD jobs, which is your key developmental jobs right here. It's like I said, I know bosses want to know, what's life like at home? What family do you have? It's like I said right here, I have my spouse, the children listed, and then some considerations. Like I said, they want to know probably your deployments, stuff like that. More so, I think this is kind of focused for boards, so that way bosses or leaders, they have to manage their profile. They know basically who to give top blocks to, and so on and so forth. All right, so it is your responsibility as the leader. When you guys commission into the Army, you become second lieutenants, platoon leaders. You will have a platoon sergeant. As awkward as it may be, they're going to be older than you. They're going to be probably old enough to be like your dad or something, but you still have to counsel them. And like I said, so I'm just going to kind of walk through the process and, like I said, give you a couple tips and tricks, what I found useful. So the reason why we do it, like I said, so that way you get to know who it is. I mean, we talk about building mutual trust all the time. We're talking about leadership attributes and competencies. Nobody's going to respect you or want to follow you if you just want them to grind it out all the time in work. So this is actually a perfect opportunity for you to actually get to know, hey, where are you from? What do you do for a living? What are your hobbies? What sports teams do you root for? So on and so forth. All right, and then like I said, it's all about taking care of soldiers, right? Taking care of the person or individual that you're with. So like right now, what I'm talking about is more like initial counseling, stuff like that, getting to meet somebody for the first time. Obviously, there could be different types of counseling. So down at the bottom of this PowerPoint slide, you can see event type of counseling, performance, or professional growth. So like I said, an event counseling could be something bad, like you failed APFT, height and weight. Maybe over the weekend there was an issue in the barracks, and it's basically a lot of leaders use the 4856 to document things that can basically get pushed up through legal channels and do Article 15s and such. But not every counseling is bad, even if it's an event. It could be a positive thing. Rarely do you see this, and I'd actually encourage you guys to give positive feedback from time to time. All right, so here's some specific events that I was kind of talking about. Like I said, substandard performance. Something happened, maybe you got a Red Cross message and you have to go on emergency leave. This is something you kind of want to just cover. Make sure you touch all the bases. Like I said, this is all about taking care of your personnel, all right? Referrals, that could be like somebody has to go to ASAP because maybe they have a drinking problem. Maybe they need some marriage counseling. You can refer them to ACS, or maybe even they have financial issues. You could just refer them to a chaplain or somebody. So when you get to a unit, typically in processing, they'll talk about all these different programs that the Army has that can assist soldiers, including yourself. And so, like I said, I mean, it could even be like a MWR event. So, like, refer somebody to get out of their barracks room to go see other things. So, I mean, kind of all a little bit off topic, but, you know, I'm reading your guys' journal assignments for spring break, and I did write a lot of good notes and feedback for people who left the area. I mean, I kind of appreciate that because, like I said, it's something, if I had the opportunity to do when I was your age, I wish I could, you know, travel a little more. I think I told you guys that as part of my introduction. Same thing, promotion counselings. Like I said, whether you got passed up, maybe you didn't meet certain requirements. I know people sometimes have to get counseled on that. Transitioning out of the Army, there's a lot of different programs that can help you, ACAP or SFL TAP. And then, like I said, separation. So a lot of that stuff, you have to get blessed off through legal and stuff like that. All right, so there's 4 different stages to the counseling process. Identify the need for the counseling, prepare the counseling, conduct it, and then follow up. Most people have a really hard time following up, and it's probably one of the more important ones because, like I said, it's all about closing the loop and making sure we take care of our guys. So right now I'm going to pull up an example counseling form. Maybe. I guess I might have to. All right, there we go. So, all right, so I'm going to show you guys a couple of different examples throughout class today. So this one's a APFT failure. This one is when Colonel Tui actually gave me my initial counseling, and then when I also gave Master Sergeant Soto his initial counseling. But right now, I'll just show you guys the blank one. Like I said, the purpose of the counseling. So like I said, there's the 3 different types. Like I said, it could be event-oriented or maybe even initial counseling. Then we talk about the key points of the discussion. Let me right here. So this is when you're preparing it. That's kind of like the important part, right? That's the key points of discussion. And then when we conduct the counseling, a lot of tips for you guys. So like I said, for the final, this is the form you guys are going to use. A lot of stuff you can leave blank or whatnot to basically fill in as you're counseling them. And then so there's even spaces at the end to where you can initial it. And then it's your responsibility on the second page to talk about the plan of action. What is that soldier supposed to do in order to meet? So say they failed APFT, you got to basically come up with a workout plan. If they're having trouble with their finances, what are they going to do better to improve that? And then they sign it that they agreed, and then they can even write in remarks. And then it is your responsibility. You can even type in here and say, hey, I will follow up with you on a weekly basis. I know a lot of guys prior service, they probably heard people FTR, failure to report, maybe because they keep showing up late to PT. Now they got to show up 30 minutes early. So the leader responsibility is I will show up 30 minutes with you. All right. And then, like I said, the follow-up is the assessment at the end. Like I said, that most people kind of forget about. Like I said, typically, like I said, this is done for legal purposes, but you even have to kind of close the loop. So when I got my instructor badge, there was an assessment that said, hey, Captain Gonzalez completed 80 hours of instruction. So like I said, I'm going to keep referring back to this. This was just kind of the blank one to show you like the 4 different steps: identifying the need, preparing it, why it's important to come prepared to your counseling session, and then like I said, the rest of it is done throughout. All right, so stage 1, identify the need for the counseling. What's the purpose? That's the first thing you want to talk about when they come into your office. Schedule a time and say, hey, I need you to come talk to me about your APFT failure, or hey, we're going to do initial counseling. All right, so they have to be prepared. It shouldn't be something like, hey, come to my office right now. All right, when you prepare it, make sure it's a suitable place, like a quiet place. A lot of times you don't want to do it during the busy time when you know somebody's going to be coming in and out of your office. Maybe put a sign on your door, tell your platoon sergeant or squad leader, say, hey, don't bother me during this time. I'm going to be doing some counseling. Like a lot of this stuff I kind of already touched on. And then so when I talk about like planning a counseling strategy and the right atmosphere, another tip that I like to do for like initial counselings, for instance, is go somewhere different. Don't just go in your office, because then it becomes kind of awkward. I know whenever I took command of my company, as soon as my first sergeant and I, we kind of just did like a more of an informal counseling, and we did it at the DFAC. Like I said, I know you could go to Starbucks or something else, just like another more of a chill environment, somewhere that's not your office. And like I said, I mean, you definitely want them probably to come to your office if it's like a negative counseling, but I would definitely recommend just finding a different location. And especially when you pick a different atmosphere like that, then you won't get interrupted with people knocking on your door and stuff all the time. All right, so like I said, that's just a tip. Maybe something you guys can use in the future. All right, so here are the components while you're conducting the counseling. You open it up, you discuss, what the problem is. Like I said, even if it was something good, and then you develop the plan, and then throughout, like I said, you make it a conversation. You don't overpower them and say, hey, sign this. They got to know exactly how they did something that, I don't know, went against your guidance or your commander's intent, and then make it clear so that way, like I said, both parties can leave the meeting or counseling session knowing how to improve, how to make the organization better. All right. All right, so here's a couple approaches. Like I said, there's a few advantages and disadvantages to both. Like I said, non-directive is more of, like I said, a conversation. And directive is like more of the only time I ever used a directive approach was doing Article 15s. It said, hey, you were late. There's no arguing with that. There's no excuses. I might ask why and say, okay, you were late, sign this, and, do pretty much do better, all right? And then obviously when you combine it, it's just, like I said, through time, you guys will get better. Obviously, the best kind is to lean more non-directive to combined approach. All right. The only thing that is not like obviously the disadvantage is very time consuming. All right, then follow up. Like I said, talk about the plan of action. Whether hey, you passed the PT test, close out that counseling, and file it in their counseling packet, and then drive on. So for the final, I don't expect you guys to follow up. I just want to see like the initial counseling. All right, so here's the counseling process. All right, like I said, identify the need, whether it's event oriented or performance professional. If it's event oriented, it's immediate. As soon as something happens, like a negative action, you want to kind of nip it in the butt almost as soon as possible. So as soon as somebody's late, don't wait 2 weeks later and say, hey, remember that time, 2-3 weeks ago, you were late to PT. Like if something happens, that's your duty and responsibility as the leader to stay later to get that done. So I would say you have 24 hours to get that done. If it's performance based, like I said, we talk about quarterly counselings, semi-annual, stuff like that. You can do every 3 months. So when you guys are doing those performance counselings, you guys have a lot of time to kind of observe and assess the situation. Like, hey, I did your initial counseling. Now I'm following up with what I think you did well or didn't do so hot. And then they talk about the 4 different steps that we talked about. And then you kind of close it out. So when you're doing performance, you can give resources and tools like I talked about earlier, and then put it down on the counseling form. If it's event oriented, like I said, maybe somebody has a drinking problem, you refer them to an agency like ASAP and take corrective action, whether it's Article 15 or whatever they do. And then obviously if it's really something that's reportable, obviously inform your boss. Like I said, one of my biggest 3 is one of them is communication. So you over communicate, let your boss know so he's not blindsided by a specific event that happened. All right, so now I'm going to go over a summary. Like I said, you on the left side is kind of like what you're supposed to do as the leader during the counseling. So obviously be empathetic and have respect. All right, because respect goes a long ways. I had the journal on what's your Army value that means the most to you. I know a lot of you guys said respect, because in order to get it, you got to give it. So don't go in there and completely blow your credibility by being disrespectful. Also, don't come to conclusions. You can be upset, write it down, and that's what the counseling's for. It's a two-way conversation because maybe there's something going on in somebody's life that you weren't aware of. All right, and if that's the case, then hey, you as a leader, you've identified something. So that's where active listening becomes involved, and like I said, being able to get the soldier or individual the help that they need. And when we're talking about appropriate questioning, this goes with experience. All right, so especially when you're doing negative counseling, I recommend this a lot, is don't do it by yourself. Do it with the platoon sergeant, or do it with your first sergeant in the room, or another battle buddy. There's been plenty of times where cadets have done some things where Master Sergeant Shipman or maybe even Sergeant Soto said, hey, sir, can you sit in this counseling with me real quick? All right, just because if there's something bad, especially like a problem child. I say problem child, like soldier that gets in trouble often. He might twist up your words and make a lot of I don't know, assumptions, or basically try and take away your credibility, saying that cursed at him, or you were disrespectful, or you told him the wrong thing. So make sure you have somebody who's knowledgeable in the room with you. And it's also good too, because that other person can also chime in and give some good, valid advice. All right. So like I said, I think the rest of this stuff's kind of common sense, but just don't stereotype, and don't lose your emotions. All right. Be professional. All right. That's what we as Army officers are. We're always professional. All right, this right side, pretty self-explanatory. I think I already covered this in a previous slide. So like I said, make sure you just open it and discuss the issue, and then definitely leave enough room on the counseling statement to write some comments. All right. Hey, when you show up to a counseling statement too, make sure you have 2 copies. All right. You keep a copy and the soldier keeps a copy. All right. So it's good for them to follow along as you're reading it, and then you can write your notes, and then obviously the one that you write on, if you need to photocopy that, you can. But typically, if there's not any very much writing going on, you just give them a copy and make sure that they have that as well. All right. All right, so here's a quick practical exercise. I'll just go and play this real quick, and then give you a little bit of feedback.
The hard deck for this hop was 10,000 feet. You knew it, you broke it. You followed Commander Heatherly below after he lost sight of you and called no joy. Why?
Sir, I had Commander Heatherly in my sights. He saw me move in for the kill. He then proceeded below the hard deck. We weren't below 10,000 for more than a few seconds. I had the shot. There was no danger, so I took it.
You took it. And broke a major rule of engagement. Then you broke another one with that circus stunt flyby. Lieutenant Mitchell, Top Gun rules of engagement exist for your safety and for that of your team. They are not flexible, nor am I. Either obey them or you are history. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Dismissed.
All right, so looking at the questions, was that counseling or coaching? Well, first I could say he didn't even make eye contact with him, which was kind of weird, and it was definitely directed, so it was definitely counseling and not much of coaching. All right. Like I said, the discipline he uses, it's more so the non-direct. So, like I said, I would definitely try and veer a little bit away from that. And then the techniques he uses is he doesn't write anything. He has them standing at basically the position of attention the entire time. So that's good when you're doing an Article 15, but not a counseling statement or coaching for that matter. So make sure, even if they are in trouble, I would let the individual sit down and talk them through it. All right, so that's it. Pretty simple, easy class. You owe me the journal assignment, which is 1 point, showing that you watched this video. And then, like I said, do a 4856, which I have set for 6 April. So that's in like 2 weeks. All right. If you can't make that deadline, I can extend it for certain individuals. Just know that I got 54 of you guys, and I really wanted to get as soon as I get that final counseling form from you guys, I can go ahead and submit your guys' grades. And I also wanted you guys to get MilSci kind of knocked out, so you guys don't have to stress ROTC, and you could focus on some of your other more important classes. All right, so before I close this out, like I said, I think I owe it to you guys to show you what an actual one looks like. So Colonel Tui, when he did this, like I said, he puts my rank, our organization, his name. He's a professor of military science. There's no date on here, but I'm sure during the counseling he just wrote it in because it's kind of like a blanket counseling statement. Right here, individual counseling. Expect doing your duties, responsibilities, and expectations of the job. So when he filled this out, what is your role as the APMS / Ops OIC? So coordinating with brigade, ensuring that the task force is good, which consists of Ohio University and Capitol. Train cadets, don't just focus on operations, since I am not a CMAT. Advise cadets in leadership positions. Like I said, I often talk a lot about Stool Dryer because I work hand in hand with him and the Big Five. Advise specific programs. I mean, everything's kind of in operation, so kind of makes sense. Assist in recruitment and retention. I mean, we did awesome last year. I mean, we couldn't have done that without the help of you guys. Serve as ambassador for organization and the advisor for all ops related stuff. And then MS1 instructor, which actually MS2, same thing. Coordinate with the NCOIC, which is Master Sergeant Soto and Sergeant Jones. Ensure that you guys have a foundation. Recruit, develop to be successful lieutenants, mentor, synchronize, improve, and then perform duties with the CMATs. You know, I need to establish a climate of excellence, be professional, be a team player, and communicate. So, I mean, we talked about communication earlier. And then, so pretty self-explanatory. Plan of action. I mean, we didn't really put too much in here. And then I just signed it, he signed it, called it a day. So, because that's what he did when I counseled Master Sergeant Soto. He was Sergeant First Class at the time. You can see the date that I have it on here. I used the same format, so pretty much similar stuff, what I expected for him as the CMAT for Charlie Company. And then what I like to do, what I've done on all my counseling statements is, like I said, I'm not trying to make this, hey, these are my expectations. Just be awesome. So what I like to do to know that I'm taking care of that said soldier, I structure it to the NCOER / OER if I'm evaluating a lieutenant. So like I said, attributes and competencies. I mean, the only one I don't have on here is character, because if you don't have character, you're probably going to get fired. So presence, I talked about, you know, I looked at his last evaluations and I saw what it said. It was obviously pretty good. And I was just giving a little bit of feedback saying, so the first row is kind of what he did before. And then this is the initial counseling saying how he can improve the organization and make his NCOER look good. So he had a CWST. He was in charge of the 12-mile foot march, and he did a PT event for the Undersecretary of the Army before I got there. A little jealous. He got a freaking sweet coin from that. And I told him basically to improve PT, tri-service event, which we ended up winning, and then getting involved with some Ranger Challenge. I know he definitely promoted a lot of you guys from Charlie Company and helped out that. All right, intellect. He's in charge of GPB, the labs, and land navigation. He received his instructor badge this year. Talent management on Charlie Company, and then the lab structure. All right, so the previous year for leads, he went to basic camp. He does commissioning, and he was one of the CASHA cadre members involved with that club. So now he was the Wolverine NCOIC, which was a lot bigger than basic camp. Still in charge of commissioning, especially with a larger class, and then some club involvement. And then develops cadet orientation, SIFDIC, and Pershing rifles. So SIFDIC's kind of just like what class the cadre have to go through to get certified. Then he went to the MSI conference with all the master sergeants, all the SMIs within the brigade. He led the M4 ranges, and then his JROTC involvement kind of like improved the organization. And it achieves. The previous year we had the MacArthur Award, have good retention rate, and then mission success. So I know it's kind of a lot for you guys, but like I said, this was my initial counseling. I wanted it to be set up to where he knew my expectations and that I was kind of taking care of him as well. Like I said, get some advice from him and then kind of drive on from there. So right here, plan of action, needed him to be a team player, seek balance personally and professionally. And then I asked him, hey, what are your expectations of yourself and then even myself? I mean, that's good, I think, coaching right there, leaving the door open so he can also give me some feedback. And then ask what his goals are, both personally, professionally. And like I said, that's where that baseball card could come in handy right there. And then, like I said, then we just kind of close it out right here. I know some of you guys might have a few questions. Honestly, I have no idea why this disagree box is even an option. I say that because it's almost like receiving a speeding ticket. You might go to court and fight that and disagree with the officer that gave it to you, but when you sign the I agree box, you're just checking and telling them that, yes, you did receive the counseling. So you will always check or initial the agree box, and then you will proceed with why you disagree, and then sign and date it. All right? And then the last one. Like I said, APFT failure, kind of a blanket statement. This was blessed off through our brigade legal. So this is kind of one that we use for everybody. On a specific day, this was your first, second, third failure, and then points of discussion, kind of like fill in the blanks. How many reps did you do? How many points is that worth? And then you were required to take one every semester, and then laying out the standards. You have 90 days to retest, and then, like I said, it becomes a discussion, so that way they know exactly when they need to retake it. This right here is what I like to call the magic bullet, because it has the regulations and all that stuff, that brigade legal. So like I said, when you guys are in the regular Army, you might want to get with your platoon sergeant or your first sergeant for a couple magic bullets for like disobeying an officer, for instance. It falls under a specific regulation. Dereliction of duty, which is failing to uphold yourself as a non-commissioned officer or leader for that matter, which could be skipping out a PT intentionally or just not doing the right thing. All right. Talk about fraternization. Like I said, maybe you know somebody or somebody's doing something they're not supposed to. All right. All right. So here's a plan of action. You will retest on a certain day, pass all the diagnostics and record, attend remedial PT, maximize your effort, establish new goals, and then obviously you want to do the goals. It's kind of a huge thing because if they fail, the goals need to obviously be passing, but something that's realistic. So this is where it becomes a conversation. I mean, there's too many times have I counseled soldiers for failing an APFT, and I say, what are your goals? And they say, I'm going to max the PT test. Like that's not a reasonable goal, all right? And then, like I said, this is an example. And then, like I said, print, sign, date. All right, hopefully I cleared that up. Like I said, showing you guys a couple examples. There's a blank 4856 on Carmen for you guys. Let me just say a few things before I close out class, all right? Hey, don't pencil whip this thing, all right? So there was a video that I just, not that it was too long, I just took it out while I was going to give the class. And it was funny, this guy, senior non-commissioned officer, just walked in the motor pool to one of his Joes and said, hey, sign this. First sergeant needs the counseling packets today. Like, I got to do this for 17 people, so just sign this. He's like, hey, Sergeant, I haven't even read this yet. He's like, just sign it. So, I mean, I was laughing because, I'm sure it happens often, but don't be that leader. You owe it to your guys to give them legit feedback. And then, like I said, there is such a thing as a bad counseling, and that's definitely one of them. So, all right. If you guys have any questions, like I said, you guys have my email, my phone number. I'm working from home, so make sure you guys are getting after it, staying in shape, and all right, that's it. Go Bucks.